It's the Fitness Lab Pittsburgh podcast, a new episode every week. A podcast about movement, part of making your life complete. Fitness Lab Pittsburgh, aka FitLabPGH, brings you interviews with people in the Pittsburgh area who understand movement is part of what makes life complete. Looking for a new movement idea or just want to hear interesting stories about people who make movement a priority? This is the podcast for you. Whether you consider the gym, dojo, or fitness studio your third place, or just want to learn more about movement, activity, and fitness to enhance your life, give FitLabPGH a listen. We interview locals in the Pittsburgh area who make Pittsburgh a great place to move. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play, or check out our website for other subscription options. Subscribing is free and gives you notifications when we release new episodes. Each podcast episode will be long enough to pique your interest and short enough to hold your attention. Have an idea for an episode? Know somebody we should interview? Or just want to connect with us? Drop us an email, fitlabpgh@gmail.com, or follow us on Twitter or Instagram at fitlabpgh. Already a fan of FitLabPGH? Check out our sister podcast, Moving to Live. Moving to Live is a podcast for movement professionals and amateur aficionados. Moving to Live offers weekly interviews with movement professionals featuring topics from career development to coaching tips and education resources to advice for parents of student athletes. We look forward to hearing from you, and we hope you enjoy our next interview, starting now. FitLabPGH is dedicated to bringing you information about movement opportunities in the Pittsburgh area and introducing you to movers you may not have heard of. If you like what you hear, leave us a feedback on Apple Podcasts. In addition to our podcasts, 3 times a week, we do movement tips and lifestyle hacks on YouTube and Instagram. We also recently introduced a FitLabPGH Features every Thursday. We feature a mover in the Pittsburgh area that we think has an interesting story to tell. Today's guest for our FitLabPGH podcast is Drew Zihmer. We came across Drew when he submitted Maverick's name for one of our first FitLabPGH features. Maverick is a German Shepherd, and he is a Schutzhund athlete. If you don't know what Schutzhund is, in the next few minutes, Drew's going to explain to us what Schutzhund is and how you can get involved if you want to be. Think about moving more this week and treating movement as a lifestyle, not just an activity. Drew, thanks for taking time to talk to FitLab Pittsburgh about what the human does in the sport of Schutzhund.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me on here today.
So the first question we'd want to ask before we find out a little bit more about you, what's the 30-second definition or shorter of what is Schutzhund?
Sure. So 1899, Max von Stefanitz creates the breed of the German Shepherd. 1901, he creates this test for breed worthiness known as Schutzhund. It's a 3-phase test tracking, obedience, and protection. And the idea is a dog has to do well at this to be worthy of being bred and to continue on the German Shepherd. So starts as the test. I think 60s or 70s, it made its way to America. And now it's more of a sport. We still do the test side of it, but a lot of us just do it for fun. And so that's what I do.
And we want to find out a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But first, we want to find out about you. I know from talking to you for a few minutes, you really are looking at movement as a lifestyle, not just an activity. And from just talking about dog ownership, you clearly recognize that you can't tell Maverick, hey, we're going to do something on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday, we're not going to do it because it's not in our workout plan. Dogs don't work that way. But are you a Pittsburgh native? If so, why are you still here? Or if you're not a Pittsburgh native, what brought you here?
I am a Pittsburgh native from Beaver County originally. Went to Gannon University, and after I graduated, moved to Baltimore and hung out down there in the DC area for a few years amidst kind of that Midwest feel of Pittsburgh. And so came back in 2011, and I've been here ever since. And it's just home. Family's here. Love the sports teams and the culture and the food and just a lot of the fun things I think that we do here.
And I'm curious, growing up, were you an active kid or were you somebody who just sat there and played video games?
No, I was active. Played, sports basketball and volleyball and football growing up, roller hockey in the driveway and just ran around. I think we were the generation of kids where we had to get called in, during the 95-degree high humidity day to just take a break. And maybe I'll slow down a little bit, but I think that you just carry that forward.
You finish college, you get a job. Did you still maintain some sort of activity level?
Yeah. So actually, in college, I played volleyball for a few years. And so when I graduated in Baltimore, there was a place called, I think it was called the Volleyball House. It was very close to where I lived, and used to go play competitive volleyball with everybody through just total amateurs up through like D1 guys who like never quite made Olympic teams. And it was a whole thing. And we'd go play all Friday nights and Saturdays and work out during the week. It was a lot of fun.
And I know some people who don't look at movement as a lifestyle would say, why'd you do that instead of going out to the bars or hanging out? Because I know there's some people that playing volleyball or doing a spin class, that's an activity. They do that, it's scheduled, but if something better comes along, they don't do it. What was it that drew you to that?
I like that endorphin rush. I guess there's that part of it. I always feel good. I mean, if you're sore and tired, it's a good sore and tired after a workout or an activity like that. But it's also the people that you meet. I like to connect with different people, and I can connect and have a good time out at a bar with somebody. But it's also a lot of fun to get out, and whether it's the dog sport world, or it was volleyball, or at the gym or running, you meet folks that have similar interests, and you end up having a lot of fun connecting with them and other shared interests. And then it's a good way to be healthy, be doing something fun, kind of get the rush, kind of check all the boxes at once.
And how did you first hear about the sport of Schutzhund?
So it was my first job out of college, shared an office with a woman, and she trained seeing eye dogs and was telling me a lot about German Shepherds. And I said it would be really cool to kind of do like the working side, could you do protection or tracking with the dogs? And she said, yeah, there's this sport called Schutzhund. And so fast forward to when my wife and I wanted to get a dog and finally had a home. And I said, I really want to get a German Shepherd. And we went from there. I said, I would like to at least try the sport. I don't know if I'll really like it or not. I hear it's a ton of time commitment. I just don't know. And so we wanted to get a dog who could probably do it without being overkill. And so that's what we went for, and the rest is history.
And we were talking before recording, Schutzhund is primarily for German Shepherds, but you do not have to be a German Shepherd. I mean, clearly you're not a German Shepherd, but you were describing one competition where you were paired up with a toy poodle. Kind of talk about how or why German Shepherds excel at this sport, or why most dogs that participate in this sport are German Shepherds.
Yeah. So it was created for the German Shepherd as a way to test the Shepherd. And the concept was that utility of the dog, that it would do a lot of things very well. It wouldn't necessarily be the best tracking dog. A bloodhound can be better, but it's going to track well. It's going to be obedient. It's going to be able to protect a person and stop a bad guy, if you will. So when you see the German Shepherd and you see the size, the drive, what they like to do, kind of mechanically what they're built for, it aligns themselves to be able to be a tracking dog, to go over obstacles, to climb, to duck under, to carry things, and then to be able to engage with a person and do that side of it. When you get to some of the other shepherding breeds like Belgian Malinois, Dutch Shepherds, they do very well as well. They all kind of bring something different to the table. Malinois, for example, are lighter weight and faster. So what they might lack in physical size, they jump higher and they run significantly faster. You go to a different breed like when I went out for the obedience portion of the BH with the toy poodle, they can't do the protection, but they could track. They can do most of the obedience, but it's never going to be able to jump up and physically stop a person. So there's limitations. But I think in general, the herding breeds, shepherding breed type dogs, they do pretty well with the sport.
So you get a German Shepherd, first dog with your wife. Was there ever a moment as a puppy where you're like, what the heck did I do?
For me, no. For her, yeah. Maverick and I had a good bond early on, and I think we kind of worked out the pecking order. My wife Tracy, she had a summer she couldn't wear shorts because, knees down, she was just like mauled, scratched, bruised. So they definitely, they had to kind of duke it out there for a little while. And there was definitely some moments I'm like, why did we get this dog?
And I know I've made the comment before on FitLabPGH movement tips and lifestyle hacks. Dogs are not accoutrements. They're part of the family, and just clear from talking to you. You get the German Shepherd. You're pretty sure you want to try Schutzhund with it. How early do you start? I know with my puppy, in no way would I claim that they are as well trained as Maverick, but they're able to sit. They're able to have friends come over and not maul them. They're older now. I know as puppies it would be the same thing. But I know they were 10, 11 weeks old, and I was doing the little Cheerios and getting them to sit. How early did you start with the quote-unquote official Schutzhund training?
So I started, we went out around 18 months, started a little bit, actually just had time commitment issues and things. And actually I didn't come back until he was about 2. And that was not ideal. That definitely put us behind the 8 ball a little bit. The upside was that he was able to learn pretty quickly once we got in because he wasn't in puppy mode anymore. The real ideal folks do come out with an 8-week, 9-week-old puppy, and they start with things. Granted, we had done home obedience sits and downs and things early on, kind of like everybody does, and we kept that going. But yeah, the true Schutzhund for us was a little delayed start, and it would have been easier had we started younger. There's little things even like sits where I taught my dog to sit incorrectly for the sport. We sit very specifically, we down very specifically because we're always trying to get points. And so that, they saw him sit for the first time and went, "Oh, you taught him to do that yourself, didn't you?" And went, "Oh, really? It looks like a sit to me." And they go, he rocks back instead of kind of scooting up, and you're going to lose points for that. And you can either reteach it or just accept it. And so, moving forward, I would start younger. Did
you reteach it or did you just accept it?
We've accepted it. I've kind of taught him to, it comes into effect. So there's a time where we recall and he runs towards me and then he sits and he's supposed to put his nose on my belt buckle. And so he does that. And when he rocks back, he creates this like foot gap. And so he's kind of learned to pretty much hit me and then kind of stop and sit. And it kind of makes up for it.
I know some people are going to be listening to this and they're going to say, well, why would I want to do Schutzhund, or why would I want to do some sort of a competition? Why does somebody do Schutzhund? I mean, obviously they have a German Shepherd. I know from talking to you and just having owning relatively large dogs, if you have an untrained large dog, life is miserable. So why the Schutzhund? You said you had to take a little bit of time off and came back at 2 years. Why not just say, I'm just going to keep with obedience training or trials or agility? Why the Schutzhund?
There's something remarkable about seeing a dog do what it was meant to do. And for a German Shepherd, I think Schutzhund is it. For a person with a short-haired pointer, taking out hunting and, that is it. And so it's really fun to see him do what he was made for when he is, there's the bad guy, we call it the escape grip, and a guy runs away and on my command, he gets to go stop him. He shakes with anticipation. He's trembling. he is so excited to go stop this guy. We don't get that just throwing a ball in the backyard. That's not for him. Maybe for, labs and other breeds, golden retrievers, that's what gets them going to the point of they can't think. It's just so much fun. And for Maverick, it's those aspects of Schutzhund. He drags me to the tracking field because he knows we're going to get to go tracking. He's nose down trying to see even how I walked there just to get there, to get started. And so it's just fun to do that. It's a lot of effort, a lot of time, but it makes it a lot of fun seeing that dog do that. And they're part of the family. So I want to let him do something that's fun. It's a good bond. I jokingly go back and forth with the Schutzhund Club if I'm there more for my dog or the friendship of the other people who feel the same way. It's a great time out with my dog, Maverick, and having fun, but it's also great to be out there with a bunch of other people who feel the exact same way.
And I'm curious, with owning a Schutzhund dog, are you the one who does all the training and the competitions with him, or does your wife do that? Is a dog typically a one-person dog with that sort of training?
Yeah, they are typically a one-person dog. I do it all. He'll listen to Tracy in the house and things like that and use the commands. But I'm the one who trains him and then handles him in the competitions. He is pretty unique, though. He will let other people handle him, which is not super normal. So it's really cool. Sometimes somebody comes out with a young dog and they don't quite understand what the picture should look like healing or exactly where the dog should be. And I can get him out and say, do this with him. And he will do it like he does for me for strangers. And so that's kind of cool. People can have some fun and sort of see what it's like with a little bit more mature dogs sometimes.
We were talking prior to recording, and you said, one of the aspects of Schutzhund is it's obedience training, and you can stop there or you can continue on. You said there are 3 different levels of training or certification that a dog can get. And then there are 3 different activities that are done in each of those levels. It's the same activities. So 3 different levels, same 3 activities for each of those levels. Kind of talk about the 3 different levels first. Actually, I guess first talk about the 3 different activities and then the difference between, and I know there's a German name for it, the first level versus the second or the third level.
So at the very basic there, it's called the BH, the Begleitete Hund, means companion dog. And that's kind of like the AKC, canine good citizen. It's on and off leash healing and temperament tests and trafficking cars, pull up and you ask for directions and things like that. And it's really just make sure, do you have control of your dog on and off leash, and can you go for a walk and have your dog be good? And
I'm curious, I just want to break in here. How old was Maverick before you felt that he had pretty good control off the leash?
Actually really early. I've got pictures. I bet we had been doing this 6 weeks and I preferred to handle him off leash than on. Very quickly. So we got through, so you do the BH and that kind of, there's a written test for the handler. It kind of makes sure that you're in a good spot. And then once we get through that, then there is we all still call it Schutzhund 1, Schutzhund 2, Schutzhund 3. It has since become IPO and is, I think officially as of this year, IGP. But all 3 levels have tracking, obedience, and protection phases. And you get scored in each phase, and you must pass each phase with a 70 points out of 100 or greater to continue on. So Schutzhund 1, tracking, you lay the track yourself, so you know when you're making left and right turns. It's about 300 paces, and you drop some articles. Obedience has an off-leash routine that maybe takes 10 minutes to complete. The dog has to retrieve a dumbbell, has to be able to jump with a dumbbell over a meter jump and over this giant A-frame that's about 7 feet tall. It's not quite a vertical wall.
I want to highlight that a dumbbell, and you were not exactly sure, but it's somewhere
a couple of pounds.
It's somewhere between 5 and 10 pounds. You said going up over a 7-foot tall wall.
That one they get to carry the lightest one, but when it's called the retrieve on the flat, and I just throw it, just in the field, and they have to be able to carry that heaviest one back at the highest level. But it's pretty cool to watch them run with this dumbbell in their mouth and clear. I think it's even most impressive over the meter jump where they just run from about 15 feet away, clear it, go pick it up and run back and jump over it. So then, we do that. And then protection, at the Schutzhund 1 level it's called a blind search. So, we have these like half tent TP things set up, and there's 6 on the field. And at the first level, they go around 1 and then they find the bad guy that we call him a helper in the last one. And then there's a routine from there. Schutzhund 2, the track, somebody else lays it. So now you don't know which direction it goes or where the articles are dropped.
And with the tracking, is this on leash or off leash?
It is on leash, but it's on a 33-foot tracking line. You're allowed to tell your dog to start tracking, and you can't start moving until the full line is let out in front of you. So it's the most, kind of dog by itself portion of the day.
Is there a timing for that?
There's not. Yeah, you could kind of get timed down if your dog just has no clue what it's doing or can't find the track.
But if one dog did it in 3 minutes, the other one dog did it in 2 minutes and 20 seconds, that doesn't mean the faster time is better.
Actually, probably the slower is better. If it's more methodical, if it's more even paced and more nose all the way down to like the dirt and the grass, that's more points.
And then what differs between the 3 levels? They do those same 3 activities: the tracking, the obedience, and the defense?
Protection.
Protection.
Yep. So in tracking, it changes. The first one is, I think, 300 paces. The second, maybe 400. And then the last, the 3 is 600 to 800 paces. The 2 and the 3, somebody else lays it. So that's the big difference. In obedience, there's small changes. The dumbbells get heavier on we call it the retrieve on the flat. So we're just standing in the field and throw dumbbells as far as we can throw it. And the dog goes out on our command and brings it back to us. So that weight changes, and we call them the motion exercises. So we have a pattern of doing sits, downs, or stands as we're walking with the dog or running with the dog. And that pattern changes at the different levels. But kind of once you can get those down, it's relatively the same. Protection, same thing. You add in little pieces. The first one, it's kind of this barrel race looking thing where they kind of serpentine through these tents looking for somebody, and each one you add 2 more. So the first one, there's just the 2, then 4, and then finally you run all 6, and it takes a football field. And so you watch this dog it's a real endurance thing to run all the way back and forth and do it. And same thing, there's different pieces at the different levels of, we call them transports, but essentially it's how you'd transport somebody that you caught, in different ways that you do it with, whether the dog and you, they're all on the side of each other, or if the guy's in front of you, and you're kind of like following them and some things like that.
And how long, if you have a dog, like if you had started Maverick and stayed with it, say you start the dog at 12 weeks, how long is a reasonable time before they can work through all three of those levels if you have a good dog?
You can't even enter the for the BH or the IPO1 or Schutzhund 1 until I think 15 or 16 months. So they won't even let a dog younger than that. That's pretty young. Between 2.5 years, I'd say is you could really start working through them. They are close enough that you can work through a lot of the details and training together. So, some people really say, I'm going to do the Schutzhund 1 and then I'm going to go on to the Schutzhund 2 and then the 3. Some people can say, we'll kind of just sort of teach it all, and then we'll get to this level and we'll just kind of knock them out.
And since we featured Maverick a couple of weeks ago on FitLabPGH Features, what level is he?
So he's got his BH. We failed our Schutzhund 1 on tracking last time around. So we're hoping to have a spring trial this year and get tracking tightened up and keep improving with obedience and protection and get a pretty nice score.
Is the hope at some point to get him through all three levels, or are you just doing this for fun?
A mix. I don't get anything if we do it, and he doesn't know. He doesn't know the difference between training day or big competition. I mean, he just goes out and has fun with me, and that's kind of the beauty of the sport. Is when you take that step back, the dogs are just happy. I mean, his tail wags the entire time we're out there, and so I try to keep that in perspective. I'd like to get the titles. I feel like he deserves me putting that effort in with him, but as long as we're going out and having fun every day, and he's having fun giving grips and healing with me and tracking, we'll go wherever we can go.
So you're not living vicariously through him when he gets his medal, when he passes the tracking, you're not going to wear it into work the next day?
No, honestly, at this point, he's we talked earlier, he's got EPI, he bloated and had surgery this past fall. I mean, at this point, I'm just thankful he's here, and anything that we get to do together is just a heck of a lot of fun.
And then with somebody who has a dog that does Schutzhund, so you've got Maverick, he's 4.5. How long can he practice or participate in Schutzhund? Is there generally a time when you have to retire him, or is it different just based on the dog's activity level?
Yes and yes. Somewhere around 6 to 8, we'll have to take a hard look at when does he retire from competition. The other part then is kind of, we work really hard to keep him in good shape. I stretch him, but before we go out, after trying to keep him as healthy as possible. He's been to the chiropractor before. We do a lot for his health and wellness. But things can happen too. I mean, it's like playing football or something. He could have an injury, or little ones accumulate over time and just get to that point. So we're always evaluating and kind of watching each other's dogs to see, hey, you ought to sit this out or take this easier, get this worked on. And that could also creep up too earlier. I mean, people sometimes have to retire a dog earlier. And I think that's part of responsible ownership and doing the right thing for the dog. It's not pushing them for our goals. It's making sure they're having fun. I think it's still come out retired. I can still come out and heel around, with me again. They don't really know the difference. So as long as he's getting loaded up into the truck and coming out and having fun and getting his tug toy and getting treats, he's having a good time.
So you could have an older dog who maybe had some arthritis and wasn't able to jump, et cetera. They could still do just in training, the tracking and the obedience, and they would have a blast just because they're doing what they have done for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. Yeah.
We had our training director, Chuck, his oldest dog, Arna, until very recently, she was still coming out most of the time. She would just go heel around a little bit, and we'd give her grips, and we wouldn't make her jump. We'd kind of come down to her and let her carry the sleeve off the field and have some fun. And you can compete. It's not called the full Schutzhund title, but they break the phases. Each one of those can be trialed independently. So if you have a dog who just tracks, you could just do tracking. And there's also obedience ones where they take the jumping out, and it's a little bit different. And it's kind of for dogs that can't do it. And so you could still do that piece.
Somebody's listening to this. We are FitLabPGH. Where in the Pittsburgh area can you find out more about Schutzhund? Or maybe you've got a dog, either a German Shepherd or another one, and you say, hey, this might be a more interesting way to do obedience training with my dog as opposed to some of the other ways or the more traditional ways.
Yeah. So I'm part of a club. It's called OG West Penn Schutzhund Club. We're located in Washington, Pennsylvania. There's also some other, or I guess I'll take a step back. Our governing body is United States Schutzhund Club of America, USCA. And so we're a sanctioned club with them. And there's a couple other USCA clubs in the area. There is one in Darlington, Pennsylvania, kind of up in Beaver County. There's one, I believe, in Wexford, and then our club. And, I think we're in a pretty good spot where we've got 3 clubs within an hour, so you can find personalities and things and hopefully find a group of people that you can train with that way. I have friends that travel 2 to 4 hours to get to a club. If they're out further in the Midwest or something, that's the closest club to them. So this is a good setup.
And was I correct when we were talking prior to recording, you mentioned that your club gets together about once a week to train your dogs together? Yeah,
we get together usually on Sundays, sometimes Saturdays, between probably 4 and 7 hours, depending on how many people. I mean, I've got a friend, he comes out with, I think he's got 7 dogs total. I think he usually brings 4 or so with him. I mean, so it just depends how many dogs we have, that we can work through, and we go out and we have a lot of fun.
And I think one of the other things you mentioned before we started recording is if you start with your dog as a puppy doing the Schutzhund training, the dog is trained in German. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we do it as an ode to the German lineage, to use German. A few people use Dutch or, Czech commands with their dogs. But it's really good for the handler because then you can't mix it up. So if I was going to say, you'll let go, I could say drop it, let go, drop the toy, any number of these things. But in German, it's aus. And so it's very easy for that dog to learn aus means drop it, and that's it. Or down is Platz, or tracking is sook. It's not go find it, go tracking. We don't say all this iterative set of words. It's just this defined word in German, and that's it. It makes it actually a lot easier for the dog to learn.
And they sound, from what you've said, they sound like declarative single syllable words that the dog can really focus in and not try to figure out which one of those 5 words, no, stop, leave it, am I supposed to follow?
Yes. And every once in a while we actually will use an English word, and it's usually because the German word is kind of too difficult to either say or sounds similar to something else we're using. So in that case, then we'll throw English back in.
Before you started doing Schutzhund, were you at all familiar with speaking German?
I was. I took it in high school for 4 years, so it definitely has given me, I guess, a little bit of a leg up. Every once in a while, I'll use words, and they'll say, that's not technically what we say in the dog training world, but in my mind, I'm thinking that's how you would say it. So sometimes I still have to get corrected a little bit.
So we're talking to Drew Zihmer. He is the owner of Maverick. He participates in the sport of Schutzhund. I'm curious, when you're not participating or training your dog in Schutzhund, when he's and I don't mean this in a bad way, he's just a household pet, because you said that. Do you also talk to him in German, or his commands, like if you want him to sit at dinner time, is it still a German command, or is there a separate set of commands?
The ones that come over from the sport, sit down, stay, let go, those are all, we just use the German commands. More household stuff then at that point usually is in English. So he and my other dog both kind of use both sets of commands. It's funny, my daughter's 2.5 and she's starting to learn the German commands. And so she'll walk around telling Maverick to Platz and sit and aus, and it's pretty funny.
I'm curious, if I were to meet him, if I told him to sit in German and told him to sit in English, which would he react faster to?
German, but he will react really fast if he sees a favorite toy.
So he can be bribed just like
yes,
children.
He definitely can.
We are FitLabPGH. We're a podcast about movement. We try to make people recognize that movement is a lifestyle, not just an activity. When we first did FitLabPGH Features, I got an email from Drew saying, is this just for people, or will you also do dogs? Because I think in my initial post in Connection University, which is a Facebook group, I said, hey, if you've got a dog. And so Maverick, I believe, was our second FitLabPGH Features. And as soon as as soon as Drew told me what he did, which was something called Schutzhund, I had to go and use Wikipedia and figure out what it is. So We want to thank Drew for talking to us about the sport of Schutzhund. We'll have show notes with links to where you can get more information if you're fortunate enough to have a German Shepherd, or you have one of those dogs that just doesn't seem to respond to obedience training. I suspect that a few weeks and learning the tools of Schutzhund will result in a much better behaved dog. So Drew, thanks for taking time to talk to FitLabPGH.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of FitLabPGH, brought to you by Moving to Live. Intro and exit music is Marathon Man by Jason Shaw. Check out the show notes for contact info for our latest guests, links to other information mentioned in the episode, and links to our sister podcast, Moving to Live. Moving to Live is a podcast about movement and exercise for professionals and amateur aficionados. Moving to Live offers topics from career development to coaching tips and education resources to advice for parents of student athletes. You can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play, or check out our website for other subscription options. Your free subscription gets you notified when we release a new episode. Questions, comments, suggestions? Email us at fitlabpgh@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter and Instagram at fitlabpgh and like us on Facebook. If you enjoy our podcasts, please tell your friends about us and consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Make FitLabPGH a go-to place to learn more about movement in the Pittsburgh area. Until next time, keep on moving.